Hello, hello, and welcome to Rome Howell, a podcast with inspiring talk and stories about exceptionally talented people. I'm Jennifer Gardner, your host.
I just started calling myself an inner voice coach this year because I really felt like I'm just getting more and more clear on what it is I'm doing. Like what exactly it is that I'm teaching women and supporting them in, and what I believe my passion is for. Like I want women to stop beating themselves up with that mean voice and live by the voice that says you are worthy now.
So around me everywhere these days, I am surrounded by amazingly inspiring women. And it's so fascinating to me how if I stay open, I can meet exactly who I'm supposed to meet, who will shine the light on the best next step for me to take, or how to look at a phase I'm going through or a situation I'm in my life in exactly the way that's going to help me the most. And Kelly Covert is one of these people. She has amazing depth and honesty, and her voice it's like molasses. So how can I not listen to Kelly? Speaking up and giving voice to this feminine perspective and what it's like to be a female in 2017 is this breathtakingly beautiful process that I'm going through. Maybe because for so many years, I was giving voice to my clients' stories, and I wasn't really thinking about my own, or I wasn't thinking of society's stories. I just ran my business and I practiced law, and as you guys all know, it wasn't enough for me after a while. And even my art wasn't fulfilling me anymore, and that's why I started Rome Howell, to have these different conversations. So when I started this podcast, I had no idea of what I was going to find. I just knew I was going to find something, but I had no clue. And honestly, I have to say that what I'm discovering is not at all what I expected. It is much deeper and substantive and rich in the most surprising and delightful ways. You know, it's like I knew I was starving, but I didn't know what I was missing, and I didn't know what I was even hungry for. So many women I am meeting through Rome Howell, or because of Rome Howell, are writing and podcasting and teaching and killing it online and elsewhere in the world and spreading their wisdom and insight. And you know, it got me thinking that if the best thing that ever comes from Rome Howell is that I can say I met these people because of this podcast experiment, then I will be satisfied, because it's really that great for me. It's that eye-opening, and it's that enriching and quality of life enhancing. Before I share Kelly Covert's conversation with you, I just want to share what I think is strikingly profound about it. And that is, she has head-on faced almost crippling perfectionism and her fears of failing as a mother of a special needs child. You know, it doesn't get more real than that, people. So, you know, that's what we talk about. And, you know, these are the conversations that I am committed to having and to sharing with you. These jaw-dropping, real, raw conversations about the messy business of being human and the beautiful experience of being human. So, with that said, I'm going to play for you my conversation with Kelly.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy to be speaking with you today because of the whole topic that we're going to be talking about, because I'm so fascinated with your work.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And Thanks for agreeing to talk to my listeners and talk to me about what you do because I'm a huge fan. I knew you through a networking group, and then I met you at Podcast Movement about 30 days ago. And I started listening to your podcast in her voice. And I have to say, I fell in love with your voice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess I was just born to be doing this. That's how I feel about it.
How nice to be in that kind of flow where you feel like exactly what you're doing is what you should be doing.
Yeah, that does feel really good. And I've realized in my work as I've really embodied podcasting in a way that I never have before this year, that I think this is the feeling that all women are seeking. Like we all want to feel like we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Oh, most definitely. And it's so challenging to A, figure out what should we be doing, and then B, to do it.
Yes, 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 and yes.
And that seems to be what your work as an inner voice coach is all about.
Totally. Exactly. I mean, I feel that listening to our inner voice, and I want to be really clear when I'm talking about my inner voice, your inner voice, our inner voice, I'm talking about that place of wisdom that is inside of us. I'm not talking about the voice that beats us up, that's mean to us, that's critical, that judges everything. That is not what I speak of. And I think one of the biggest challenges is discerning between the two of those and really getting familiar with what your own inner voice sounds like and understanding what you need to do on a daily basis to be able to hear that. And so what I help women do is, first of all, develop practices in their lives to start discerning the difference between the two, the inner mean girl, I like to call the mean voice, and our inner voice, and then practices to connect on a daily basis, and then accountability to really follow through on the things that your inner voice is asking you to do, because usually those things are not in your comfort zone. They're not super, super easy, and sometimes they can be really, really scary. And so it takes a lot of courage and trust and initiative to really do those things.
Absolutely. I know that's totally true for me. The things that frighten me the most are usually the things that help me grow the most. And the things that I think, oh, maybe you should do that, you should try that, they're just really hard to do. And sometimes I wonder, where is that idea coming from? And is it an idea that I really should be following, or am I crazy out of my mind? And then when I get the am I crazy out of my mind question, is that my mean girl, as you would put it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a really good practice for trying to tell the difference. And I really believe that our inner voice speaks to us in many different ways. I journal a lot, and I can really connect with my inner voice through journaling, through writing. I also meditate. And when I meditate, I don't get like voices speaking to me. I just get really quiet. My brain gets still, because usually up there in my brain, I'm a hot mess. Like there's all kinds of stuff going on all of the time. And so I really have to make an effort to clear all of that out and to get still. But I also feel like our body speaks to us. Our inner voice speaks to us through our body and the way that our body feels. And so when you have this sort of like crazy idea and you're trying to figure out where that's coming from, I like to think of trying it on. So just like we would go into a dressing room and we would try on a beautiful dress, you put on that dress and you know immediately if it fits you well, right? Like you feel it. You feel it. It feels right. Then there's lots of other decisions to make after that about if it's the right kind of dress or if it's the right price for you. But when you put the dress on your body, you know if it fits and you know if it doesn't fit. You don't even need to look in a mirror. And I think that that's how our inner voice works too. When our inner voice tells us something, we can kind of try it on and see how it feels. What does it bring up for you? What are the physical sensations that it brings up for you? When you try on that idea, do you feel tight in your throat? Does your stomach clench up? Chances are that if you're feeling sort of that anxiety kind of feeling in your body, that's not your inner voice. But if you feel excited, like when I try on ideals and they're right, I feel really fluttery in my stomach as opposed to tight. And so starting this practice of trying things on your body and seeing how your body reacts to them is also a really good way to begin to discern, is this something that my inner voice is asking me, or is this some sort of expectation that I'm putting on myself? Or is this something I think I should be doing or that I need to be doing? And it's a lifelong practice. We're going to get it right sometimes and we're going to get it wrong sometimes, but the more we do it, the easier it will become.
So tell me, you said that you have different techniques that you use to get in touch, and it's meditation and it's journaling and it's this concept of trying something on and seeing how it fits. Is there anything else, or is that pretty much it? And if that's it, my question is, do you meditate and journal every day?
Okay, so this is such a good question. Those are my main three, but I feel like everyone has different ways. And for some people, it's just sitting still. Like that's really hard for some women, just to sit still and breathe and not do anything.
Oh, for sure.
Right? And another place where my inner voice speaks to me very loudly, and you're going to laugh when you hear this, is in the car while I'm listening to other people's podcasts. It's the weirdest thing because if it's quiet, a lot of times if it's quiet, I'm thinking in my head, like I get the to-do list going or whatever. But sometimes I found when I put on someone else's voice, and it has to be a podcast that I enjoy and that I would normally listen to, but sometimes I can just zone out just a little bit. And then all of a sudden I get like this rush of ideas and wisdom from my inner voice. And that's actually how I came up with the name of my podcast, In Her Voice. It was like a bolt of lightning while I was in the car driving home one night, listening to someone else's podcast. And so that's a little counterintuitive because I'm not always really quiet, but that's where my journaling and meditation comes in. Because I have found in my life, if I really want to have access to my inner voice, always, like a through line right to her anytime I need her, I need to have that morning practice. And the morning practice isn't always where I'm hearing her. The morning practice is where I'm creating the space to allow that. And I'm clearing my mind. And this summer, actually, I just did a podcast recently about this. I was not diligent about having my morning quiet time every morning. I was getting it maybe half the time, because my kids were home from school and we were out of the routine and vacation and this and that. And I really, really could tell a difference. And then when I get back to a daily practice, all of a sudden my creativity is flowing. I'm in a much less reactionary place in dealing with my family and my loved ones and my friends. And I just feel like more of me. When I'm doing that on a daily basis. So do I do it on a daily basis? No, I'm not perfect. And I will be the first to admit that. But that's always my goal, is to really have that little bit of time in the morning.
So when you have this little bit of time in the morning, are you journaling or meditating, or what exactly are you doing in order to access that deeper part of yourself?
Well, all of the above. And it doesn't always look the same. One non-negotiable that I have in the morning is I use a bullet journal. If you Google bullet journaling, you have like a daily page. And I really made it to be what I need it to be. So I make my daily page and I write out all of the things I'm grateful for every single morning. I do that. And it's usually a list of like 4 or 5 things. And then I also write my goals and my vision, like what I'm dreaming about, what I'm really wanting right now. I write that down every single day. And then I take a little bit of time to kind of unpack the things that are keeping my head busy. Like if I have stuff going on, I take a look at my calendar. I just unpack all of that. And then I journal. And when I sit down and journal, sometimes I'll be writing on a specific thing. Like right now, I'm really doing a lot of work around manifesting and releasing limiting beliefs of my own around money and my ability to earn money. So that's the work that I'm doing now. But sometimes I will just write stream of consciousness, whatever comes up. And usually after I journal, then that's when I sit and I use the Insight Timer app on my phone to do either a guided meditation, or I will just put on some binaural beats for, 5 or 10 minutes and just sit and breathe. And that's sort of my routine. And like I said, it doesn't look exactly the same every day, but that's what I strive for.
I recently started a similar practice where before I go to sleep at night, I write down the things that happened that day that reflect what it is I'm moving towards, what it is I want to create in my life. And then I write down how I want to feel and experience my day the next day before I go to sleep. It is so powerful. I had a trial a couple months ago, and it was a complete game changer for how I felt every morning going into that trial. Everything that I wrote down the night before about how I wanted to feel and how I wanted it to go, it really happened. It unfolded that way. And so now this has become a nightly ritual, but I also like to journal during the day. And it's funny, the more I do it, the more I want to do it.
Yeah, I agree, because it feels easier. It's like running. When you first start running, it sucks. It's so hard, and you don't know if you're doing it right, and you can't breathe. And you're like, I can't believe people like to do this. And then as your body gets in shape and it becomes used to doing that, it's, freeing. And I really think that that's how journaling is too. The more you figure out how you need to do it for you and just release expectations of what you think you need to be doing or what it needs to be looking like or how it needs to feel and just do it. Wow, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
So you're talking about your process of getting to know yourself better, getting clearer on you, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let me ask you something, because I think there's a lot of people that hear the word inner voice and maybe they associate it with some type of a psychic ability or clairvoyant aptitude that a person might have. Is there a distinction between the two for you? Or do you ever have experiences that are prescient or clairvoyant or whatever the words are that people use in order to describe like a psychic experience?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. I really feel, first and foremost, that my inner voice is deeply connected to my God. And you may call it whatever you want, the universe, a higher power, the divine source. But I really feel like there is something greater than me in this world that wants good for me and wants to give me everything that I desire and wants to see me succeed and live out my life's true purpose the way that I'm meant to. And so I really feel that that is the source of my inner voice, and that is deeply rooted inside of me. And so because of that, yeah, I do think that my inner voice and my intuition, or whatever you want to call it, are the same thing. And it's interesting because for me, this has just been an awareness that's been coming up for me in the past year. When I'm with someone talking, if I'm coaching or if I'm just talking with someone who's telling me about what's going on in their lives, I get intuitive hits of ideas for them, of solutions. I call myself an idea channeler because it flows like it's like the faucet turns on high and it just flows out. And I will share that with people if they care to hear it. Some people don't want that. And so I just keep that to myself if they don't want that. But I do feel like that is a gift of mine. And it's not something that I feel comfortable using the word psychic around. And that's just totally semantics, really, right?
Right.
But is it intuitive? Absolutely. Is it coming from me? I don't think so. I really believe that it's coming from a higher source and that, God is giving me those ideas and I take them freely and I don't claim them as my own. I say, this is what's coming up for me. This is the idea that popped into my head and take it or leave it, but maybe this would be something you could use. And I really feel that it's the same. And the more we connect with our inner voice that, is us, I think the more we recognize that we all have intuition like that. We all can be deeply connected to a higher source of power and wisdom, and that's available for everyone.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. How long have you been doing this work?
That's such a good question, Jen, because I have been doing work as a life coach since about 2013, like specifically working with women on reaching their goals and living into their inspired potential. And I just started calling myself an inner voice coach this year because I really felt like I'm just getting more and more clear on what it is I'm doing. Like what exactly it is that I'm teaching women and supporting them in, and what I believe my passion is for. Like I want women to stop beating themselves up with that mean voice and live by the voice that says you are worthy now. And that is what I'm so passionate about. But in my life, I'm also a professional musician. I don't know if you know that.
I do. I know you're a
Yeah.
professional flutist.
Right. And so I also teach flute, and I've been doing that since 1998. And it's interesting because when I look at my life, I can always see a through line in everything that I do in teaching flute students. I did triathlon coaching for a while, but there's this through line always of helping particularly women connect with who they really are and the fact that they are worthy to do whatever they want. They are worthy to do whatever they want in music, in sport, in life. And so I always feel like my trajectory has always been on the same path. It's just getting clearer and clearer and clearer as I've gotten older.
I guess I'd like to talk a little bit more about the challenge of trusting. I mean, there have been times in my own life when I heard a voice so loud and clear about what I should do. And, I always have that conversation with myself. Is that real? Am I crazy? Should I believe it? Is it accurate? Or is it just the negative me or some piece of me that is just making this up because of fear or some other thing? But, I have to say, in looking back, I'm usually really right. And sometimes that voice feels like it's coming from outside of me. And sometimes it feels like it's coming from a place deep inside of me. And trusting that and acting on that is a really fascinating dynamic. And sometimes if you get an idea that feels like it's really true, but it's not really in sync with where you thought you wanted to go or what you thought you wanted for yourself, there's that fear that I experience sometimes. Well, I don't want to give that idea too much mass because I don't really want that to happen. But all the time, more and more, it's right. The voice is like right on. What do you have to say about that process of trusting?
Well, number one, it's hard and it takes practice. Like all things that are hard, we have to work at it. But I think too that everyone is different. So for me, I think I'm sort of a natural risk taker. And I don't mean like I'm jumping out of planes. I don't like to take physical risks like that. Actually, I'm very I don't even like to jump off a small rock into a lake. But when it comes to doing crazy things, like starting a podcast, like starting my own business, like not having what I would call quote unquote real job, that's risky behavior to a lot of people and something that a lot of people wouldn't feel comfortable with. I think that I have a high tolerance for that. And so I think because of that, the trust is not as hard. The trust piece is not as hard for me. And I think the other part of that is because I'm a natural sort of risk taker in that way, I more easily put myself out there into a place where I'm doing the thing and then realize that it was the right thing. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of both. So you kind of have to say, what kind of person am I? And if you're not a person that's a risk taker, you start with smaller things. Mm-hmm. And as you do the smaller things, you have to take the time, like you say, to look back and recognize, oh yeah, that was my inner voice telling me to do that. And I did it and it was right. Mm-hmm. And you start building up this critical mass of proof that your inner voice is never going to lead you wrong. And that has to weigh out the proof that it will, right? That belief that we're told, that we get from lots of different places, that your life should look a certain way, or you need to do certain things in order to be the person that you're supposed to be. And we all have stories that we're told and that we believe that are put on us from like when we're teeny tiny kids. And so it's really about sifting and sorting through all of that to discover the true essence of who we are. And then that's the place that we begin to trust. So I think it's a complicated process, and it involves a lot of deep work. It involves looking at every aspect of who you are and honestly saying, is this me? Is this who I am? Is this who I want to be? Why do I think that I need this? Is this something that somebody told me I needed? So for me, I am a perfectionist by nature, and I've always wanted to be the best at everything. And I think because of that, I told myself a lot of stories about what my life needed to look like in order for me to be quote unquote successful. And now I've had the time and the years, I'm 43. So I've had the years of practicing, of sifting through and saying, you know what, I don't need that. I can kind of burn off those things that I don't need and get to the essence of who I am and trust that more than trusting what I've heard about who I need to be my whole life.
I completely relate to that. And listening to the inner voice, and then at the same time, taking the action that feels consistent with that. And it's a balancing act between what's safe and what's risky. And sometimes you have to risk to really know.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not scary, you're not going to grow from that. I think we've already touched on that at the beginning of the show here, but that fear piece makes it hard, but it also makes it worth it because there's growth through that and there's learning through that. And even if you fail, there's learning there. I mean, everything is an opportunity to get that much clearer on who you are, what your inner voice is asking you to do, and who you're not.
Right. So I know a little bit about you because we've had a chance to talk offline. And I know that you're willing to go really deep in our podcast interview. But we talked about your journey to becoming this inner voice coach. And you described it to me when we spoke recently about how it was a two-pronged journey. So are you feeling open and comfortable talking about that?
Totally. I'd love to share that with you.
You and I both have something in common, and that is that we're not afraid to go deep. So now I kind of want to go a little bit deeper with the question that I want to ask you about, which I think, listeners would really benefit from hearing about where you were challenged and in pain in your own life that led you to doing this beautiful work. And as I recall, you were telling me previously about you are a recovering perfectionist and an overachiever, and your experience of being a mother and some difficulties that you experienced during motherhood are the dynamics that led you to be who you are today and the work you're doing today. Do you care to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's one of my most favorite stories to tell because I can look back on my life, and I think we all can do this, and point out the few moments that were truly life-changing, and this is one of them. So like you said, I am a recovering perfectionist now, but before this moment, I was a perfectionist. I was a chronic overachiever. I had to be the best at everything, and I was really good at things. I was successful. I graduated at the top of my class. I was president of many things on campus. I got a great assistantship to go to a grad school. I was always the top at whatever I was doing. And I worked hard for that. And so I was taught the lesson that if you work really hard and you try and try and try and you keep achieving and achieving and achieving, people are going to tell you you're great and you're going to feel good and you're going to get what you want and you're going to figure things out. And so that's how I was living my life. And I was rolling along and, I did have moments of wondering, like, why do I always feel like I have to go after another thing? But then, I'd be like, just go after the other thing. And then I had my first child. And I think all mothers can attest that motherhood is a journey that really does transform you. And for me, immediately, like the moment my child was born, I was challenged by that journey because he was a very challenging baby, hardly slept at all. He was really fussy all of the time. I had to hold him all of the time. And I really felt that I couldn't figure out how to be a good mom. And so I employed all of my tactics that I used throughout my life. Like I did everything quote unquote right. And I read all of the books and I tried and tried and tried. And it didn't work. Like I was really just failing. That's how I felt. Like I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to connect with my son on a really deep level. And as he got older, it began to get harder and harder. And when he was in kindergarten, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is high functioning autism. And for like 5 minutes, I was like, oh, that's it. Like it's not my fault.
Right.
And then I went right back into that same mode. Okay, now I'm the mother of a special needs child. So now I have to read all of those books, and now I have to figure out how to do it for this kid. And I want everyone to think that I'm doing a good job. And when you have a child with special needs who you can't control their behavior, right? That's not how it works. And it was really, really hard for me. And there were moments that I didn't even want to be in the same room as my child. And I was ashamed of that. I thought, if I can't figure out how to be a mom, which is, I feel like, at the time I felt like that's something all women can just do naturally. And I can't figure this out. And if I can't do that, what can I do? It just felt like such an elemental failure for me. I kept trying and trying all of my old tricks and nothing was working. And I can still remember so clearly one evening I spent dinner in my room in a mommy timeout because it was another night where I couldn't be in the same room as my kid without feeling frustrated with him and frustrated with myself, that I was frustrated with him.
How awful.
It's a bad feeling. It's a really bad feeling. And I share this so transparently because I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. And I know I'm not the only one who's gone through this. And so that night, after my son went to bed and he was asleep, I went and laid down in his bed beside him because I just wanted to be near him and not feel frustrated. I just wanted to be near him and love him. And as I laid there, I got still and I was listening to his breath, and my breath slowed down with him. And all of a sudden, I had this sort of amazing realization that in order to love him just how he is, I need to love myself just how I am.
Wow.
Right? And
yeah,
it starts with me. Like, I can't be judging myself all the time. I can't try to look like every other mom on the block because my kid's not like every other kid on the block. And I have to let go of my expectations of what I thought motherhood would look like, of what I thought it would mean to be a mother. I had to burn all of that off and just start with loving me and knowing from the depths of my soul that I was worthy to be a mother and that I could do it. And then just trusting it. And like you said, we were talking about the trust. I still have to work on that because my mothering doesn't look like everyone else's mothering. And from the outside looking in, I feel like sometimes people raise their eyebrows at what I'm doing or question what I'm doing. And I just have to trust that I love myself and I love my child and I will give him what my inner voice tells me to give him. And that was really the beginning of this realization for me that there's something deeper within all of us that we have to access in order to trust, in order to finally come to that place of knowing that we are worthy. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to do all of the things. We just have to understand that we're worthy and tap into that on a daily basis.
Right. And that is the ultimate challenge. I mean, I know that that's a challenge for me as a trial attorney, showing up, tapping into myself in the most vulnerable and authentic way, because that is how jurors connect through me to my client, is when I'm also showing up in a genuine way, without any pretense, and in touch with my emotions and my client's story and how that impacts me and my story about my client's story. You know, these words on the surface, they sound simple to understand, but to practice it, to me, it's very confronting. I mean, I practice and practice and practice. And then in this new work that I'm doing, it's the same thing. The struggle to show up in the new world where if you want to serve a bigger audience, you don't rent office space and hang out a shingle and announce, okay, I'm now going to be an inner voice coach.
Right.
It's like very challenging in today's world to reach the people that you're meant to serve. And it requires being very visible. And that takes a lot of courage. And if you're not being authentic, people can feel that.
Oh my gosh, they feel it. And you know what else? We feel it. When we are not being authentic, when we are not being true to ourselves, we feel it. And I really believe that that is one of the main sources of dissatisfaction in people's lives, is that feeling, that knowing that they are not being who they are meant to be.
Right. And then the fear. I mean, then there's that whole other layer of the fear of being who they really are.
Yeah, it's totally scary. It's totally scary. And we really have to work on giving ourselves permission. And I think another really great tool to help us in that journey is to surround yourself with people who love you and trust you no matter what, that they're going to accept you, that they're going to accept the real you, that you can practice, if you will, being completely 100% authentic with a smaller amount of people, and then get more comfortable with that and build up the trust in that and start to build up almost a new identity of who you are without all of the confines of your past stories or your expectations or all of that stuff. So having those key people in your life, and that could be, a partner, it could be a really close friend, it could be a family member, it could be a coach, but having someone who holds that space for you to be you and for you to know you're totally accepted no matter what.
That is perhaps the greatest gift that we can give to each other.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's what I strive to give to everyone that I come into contact with. I mean, it could be the barista at Starbucks or, my kids or my friends at the gym or whatever. I really want to hold that space for them because I know how important it is for me to be showing up as me.
Wow, it's such an exciting time to be alive. And the online space and the communities that have sprung up there, which I know you're also very active in, are really ideal for this type of a process and for this kind of work.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's an element of safety, right? When we're online, and it's so strange. I don't even know why we feel this way, but I think we feel more protected. Maybe because we're not face to face or something like that. But if you can find a group where you feel that comfort level to sort of start to be you and start to step out and start to say, this is what I believe, this is who I am, start to say, I am worthy. We just need more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, it's really challenging for me. I'm availing myself of it, but it's challenging. It's getting easier, but for me to show up and speak, who I am, what my truth is in the online space has been a real process, but it's been hugely important growing process for me.
Well, yeah, and I think it can be so empowering because, again, that's where we start to build our trust in our inner voice. That's where we start to listen and we can say, I'm safe. My inner voice is going to keep me safe. I'm safe to be exactly who I am.
Do you ever ask yourself about the content that you're putting out there as a podcaster and think about how, as long as you pay the hosting fees, that content is going to live on the internet forever? And do you ever have any reservations about revealing so much of yourself in this medium?
Okay, so this is such a funny question because I'm going to tell you exactly what's coming up for me right now. I don't have any problem putting this out to the world, but the person that I always come back to, like, what if she hears it, is my mom.
Oh my God.
What if my mom hears this? And I think that that's so indicative of our stories, right? I have to work the hardest at taking down what I don't need that I learned from my mother. or that I was taught by my mother, or that my mother puts on me, or that I take on from my mom, because there's all of that. And we all deal with this. And my mom is a wonderful woman and I love her and she loves me deeply, but it's the stories that I made out of my childhood with her. So she was a great mom and I don't want to lead anybody in wrong thinking of that, but that is what scares me more than anything. That is what always gives me pause before I hit the publish button. I'm not kidding you.
I totally relate. My mother listens, and I have to say there are some things that I hesitate to share about my own story because it's my story, my experience, my reality. I'm not sure she would totally agree. And the last thing in the world I want to do would be to say something and for her to be hurt by that.
Right. Yeah. And I know that that would never be in your intention. Right. And that's never my intention either. But we still have a responsibility to ourselves to tell our own story. And so, yeah, I don't worry about other people hearing it because this is me. Like the person that I am being with you on air is the same person that I would be if it was just me and you in a room. And I feel really confident in that because I love who I am. And I've done a lot of work on that, and I continue to do a lot of work on that. And so I think that's why I feel 100% okay with putting myself out there, because the other piece is I am here to serve. I'm here to teach. I'm here to support. And if there's one woman who will listen to this and connect with my story about not wanting to be in the same room as my child, that made a difference today. And that's my purpose here. I am on this earth to help women. I truly believe that. And if that means putting myself out there, that's what I do.
Well, Kelly, thank you for putting yourself out there because I'm a devoted listener and I get so much value from your podcast. And so can you please tell listeners where they can connect with you and hear your podcast?
Totally. And thank you for the kind words, Jen. I really appreciate it. The best way to find all things related to me is my website, which is kellycovert.com. That's KELLYCOVERT. And you can learn about working with me as an inner voice coach. I have a course on overcoming perfectionism there. I have a really wonderful group membership program called The Inner Circle. And of course, my podcast, In Her Voice, which comes out twice a week. And so there's lots of episodes for you guys to catch up on if you haven't been listening. And then I'm also on social media at Kelly J. Covert on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Kelly, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast and speak to my listeners. I love your message. I love your work. I think you're just wonderful. I'm a huge gushing fan. So thank you.
And thank you, Jen, and thank you for being you.
So, do you see what I mean? Do you see how freaking amazing Kelly is and how it's worth every minute that you spent listening to her? Or is that presumptuous of me? Seriously, if you enjoy this content, please go to iTunes and rate it and review it, because when you do that, it helps the show be discovered more easily by other people that might enjoy it or benefit from what my guests have to say, or maybe even from what I have to say. And you can follow me on Facebook at Rome Howell Creative with Jennifer B. Gardner, and on Instagram at JenBGardner22. And you can email me at romehowell@gmail.com. So if you have any questions or comments or anything at all you want to say, I respond to every email and I would love to hear from you. So thanks again for listening. Take care.
That's it for this episode of Rome Howell. Rome Howell is produced in Los Angeles, California, with production support and editing services by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios in Chicago. I'm Jennifer Gardner. Feel free to leave me your comments and suggestions for stories you would like to hear, people you would like me to talk to, questions you would like me to ask. You will find me at Rome Howell on Facebook and at Jen B. Gardner on Twitter and at romehowell.com, where you can email me and sign up to hear the podcast every week. I really look forward to receiving your questions and your feedback and your requests. I'm grateful, and it's a lot of fun to be able to talk to you this way. So thanks again for listening, and take care.